Welcome in, everybody, to the Landry Football Podcast. I am Chris Landry, back again on Thursday, as it's our standard, somewhat, time at 9 Central on Thursdays. We've kind of been a little bit of transition with this podcast. Not to bore you with the details, but we own this podcast, but we have in partnership with the folks at Radio Influence, and we've broken our relationship with them as they were not able to sell the podcast quite like we needed, and so we're having to move on, and unfortunately, kind of having to start over as we are going to be entering an agreement in the process with a new group. So we want to encourage anyone that's listening to this podcast, if you're catching this through LandryFootball.com, what have you, we are going to try to continue this podcast. We'll probably be doing it through the folks at Podcast Park in Atlanta, but we certainly are the Scout's Eye, the SEC podcast. So we're looking to grow this and obviously take what we did. The goal is to get all of you that were subscribed through the Radio Influence group to now sign up for Landry Football's conference call so that we can get you over to this. And then we're certainly going to have you transition in, Ken, one more time to the Podcast Park group when we have that done. But once again, we're excited to be back. I want to get into something today that I think is really interesting, and it's timely, but it, as the show name would indicate, it's about football. And I'm going to go back to a football coaching search that one of many that I've been involved in, that what happens behind the scenes is a lot different than what's done in public. And the genesis of this, those of you that listen to the SEC podcast are aware that SEC football and beyond, we do talk some beyond, and we've talked a lot about the LSU baseball coaching search, which has kind of taken on a life of its own. Those of you know, I work in football 365 days a year. My expertise in baseball consisted of playing it all the way through high school, American Legion ball, and was a high school baseball coach, as you have to coach multiple sports. But I don't work in baseball every day. So when I'm talking about coaching searches, it's things that I'm involved in, and you can verify both sides, which if you can't do that, then you're really not accomplishing anything because you really don't know the whole story. And so on the baseball side of this, I don't know the baseball people. I know people who know the baseball people, but if you know me, you know, secondhand information is just not really something that I rely on. It's got to be firsthand, and it's got to come firsthand both sides. The LSU baseball coaching search, Scott Woodard is involved in doing that, and it has taken on a life of its own, a lot of speculation. And I think it's interesting because there are some parallels to what has happened recently in the LSU baseball coaching search, much like the Michigan courting of Les Miles, quote unquote, coaching search, football-wise, which I was involved in, and didn't really happen the way that most media in Baton Rouge thought it did. And again, it's important to understand, first of all, I'm not a media person. So I have respect for what people have to do in the media. They have to get information from people that really don't want to give information out, or in some cases like to give it out to kind of act like a big shot, but they really don't know. Remember, those who know don't talk. Those who talk don't know. The local media folks have it tougher because local media folks may have some contacts at the school. They should have some contacts of the school of which they cover, but they don't know the other side of the story. So in a coaching search, they don't have, quote unquote, the same contact for the candidate or somebody at the school. Those things are just not the same. So therefore, getting one side of the story is not the answer. It's just very, very difficult, which is why most stories are broken by national folks. First of all, people are more willing to talk to national folks because national publicity is better than local publicity. National folks are more inclined to have sources on both sides. The other thing today is we're living in a world where there's a lot more people that are, fake media. People that come on TV, radio, that really have no background, have no journalistic background, have no background in the game, and really don't know. But they're trying to get clicks, and they don't really care if they're right or wrong. They just want to get clicks. So it's really important today. It used to be in the old days where if you had information that was put into a journalistic endeavor, you could count upon it. Because they're not going to it unless it's been sourced several times and resourced and verified and resourced. So when they went with it, you can pretty much go to bank on it. In today's world, it's more important to know who you can trust. And I think that's today's world, and it's been that way for a while. And it's just only getting more and more like that, where anybody can just go up and have a podcast, no credentials. And identifying and knowing people's credentials are really important. And I think that things get out of hand. Real quick, I will answer this, and we'll certainly answer your questions here in the chat room. So feel free to bring them on board as I kind of wave this story. And once I get into it, I kind of want to kind of relay some of the stuff. And we'll get into more stuff we went on the Scout's Eye show, breaking down the offensive schemes of NFL teams. We'll do that on the defensive side as well. But before I advance this story, Tony, he's joined us. Good morning, Tony. Been hearing rumors that the Browns could give Baker Mayfield a long-term contract this summer. Your thoughts on this? Could it happen, or it's just to get clicks? No, I think there's some legitimate talk. I had it in my notebook yesterday. There's, I think, interest in doing it, but Tony, the interest in doing it is always there for the right price, the right amount of years. So, do I think there's just as good of a possibility that they take this into the season and see how well he does this year? Yes. But it depends. It depends on what they're able to get the deal done. The deal now comes with advantages and risks on both sides. Getting a deal done now, well, you can get a deal done for less money now than it will be at the end of the year. Just the growth rate of the cap, when we go back to normal cap, is going to be greater. And if he plays well, which you hope he does if you're the Browns, it's going to cost you more at the end of this year. So it behooves you to get a deal done now if you're the team. If you're the player, in this case Baker, there's security in getting a deal done now because you don't know what this season will yield in terms of productivity, success on the field. You can quote unquote bet on yourself. A lot of them do that, and likely will end up with more money at the end of the year. But if you can get a deal done now and you feel comfortable with it, there's security now. Burn the hands better than two in the bush, right? So there's absolutely incentive to do it now, but because they may look at it, the numbers and the years will determine whether they can get it done now or whether they have to wait to the end of the year. If it gets too cost prohibitive, or they feel, not that they can't fit it in, but if they feel like the numbers are too high, or in the case of the player, not enough, well, then that's where it becomes, we'll get it done at the end of the year. Thank you for that question. Appreciate you. And again, we're certainly welcome those. So as we get into the reason for the topic is kind of what's going on in the LSU baseball search. There's a lot, and again, I'm not sitting there burning the phone lines, caring about who they hire, but I have a lot of connections with, well, the guy that's making the decision and others. And what's interesting about it is that there's often a lot of information that's floated for different reasons. And so the purpose is not just this story or the Michigan story of a few years ago. That's just an example of what often happens. In the case of LSU baseball, in this case, they've got a legendary baseball coach that's still active in the community in Baton Rouge that was pushing for a certain candidate, Mike Bianco, the head coach at Ole Miss, to be the guy. It's one of his former players. Been encouraging the athletic director, Scott Woodard, to go in that direction. And probably, in terms of just taking it too far, got his buddies in the media, Skip Bertman did, and ex-players to kind of go forward with the Mike Bianco talk in an effort to kind of sway the public, put public pressure towards Scott to do what he would want him to do. Now, what's really happened is Mike Bianco thought he was going to get the job. So he comes in for what he thought was kind of a tidying up of a deal, only to find out it was an interview. And then basically, along with another person that was interviewed, the East Carolina coach, the same day, and has to go back to Ole Miss hat in hand to basically take his name out. You can't go to a rival school, interview, and he wouldn't have gone ahead and interviewed if he didn't think he was going to get the job. So there were indications to him, he thought he was getting the job. He didn't. I don't know how the conversations went. I don't think the athletic director misled him. Maybe he did. I know Scott. I don't think he did that, but I can't say that for certain. But Skip Bertman definitely was under the impression that Mike was going to be the guy, to the point where a lot of media folks were running with it. He's the guy. He should be the guy. It should be done by Friday, meaning last Friday. Well, that ended. Now, why did the athletic director do this? In this case, it was you're going to go publicly and try to embarrass me to make a move to hire one guy, and you think you're more powerful in your role. Skip Bertman was also the former athletic director after he was baseball coach. This was a shot across the bow saying, you may be the legendary baseball coach with 5 national championships, and I certainly respect your opinion, but when you step over the line and try to embarrass me publicly or try to shame me into doing something, then I'm going to strike back. And he struck back by basically emasculating Skip Bertman, because Mike Bianco basically thought he was getting the job. He certainly wasn't coming for an interview. He was coming to wrap it up, because that's what I think he was under the impression that it was. And so he knows that Skip is not as powerful as he thinks he is. And that ended Mike. He took his name out. All perfect for Scott Woodard, because that's not who he apparently wanted. If he wanted him, it would have been done. Now, why doesn't he want him? That's neither here nor there. He's interviewed some other folks. Now, just kind of get into that. So it basically, from an athletic director standpoint, remember, Scott Woodard is not from an athletics background. He's a political background. He understands how to work a room. He understands how to work the PR. He gets it. So no one has to say one way or the other. Mike takes his name out of it, and his hands are washed of it. Now, this reminds me an awful lot of a coaching search that I was involved in. You undoubtedly remember. It was very public, and it came out on ESPN, breaking news. Michigan has offered their coaching job to Les Miles, the LSU coach, on the same day that LSU was playing for the SEC championship game. Pretty big, right? Done deal. I mean, everybody's got word on it, right? Didn't happen that way. Here's what happened. Michigan had already decided that they were going to hire Brady Hoke. There was a large contingent of boosters, ex-players, Michigan folks that are very influential and very important to the Michigan program, like any other program. They wanted Les Miles. So, Bill Martin, the athletic director, the president, Mary Sue Coleman, who did not want Les Miles, and I'll tell you the quick story why. Mary Sue Coleman, very, very close to Lloyd Carr. Lloyd Carr was very instrumental, particularly as his grandson, who dealt with an illness and ultimately died, unfortunately, tragically. Lloyd was very instrumental in being a big-time fundraiser for the Children's Hospital at Michigan. And just worshiped Lloyd. And Lloyd Carr had decided that he was, a year before, this is the year that Appalachian State beat him and all that. That wasn't like, well, because of that, and Lloyd was on it. Lloyd had already told him privately that this was going to be his last year. Didn't come out. Anyway, Lloyd Carr and Les Miles don't get along, mainly because when Les Miles didn't get the Michigan job and Lloyd did, Les was very negative to the Michigan program. He negatively talked about Lloyd Carr, and it got back to the key folks at Michigan. So Les Miles was not popular among the people that were making the decisions at Michigan, but he was popular by all accounts from a lot of the fan base. He was having success at LSU. He had, one of Bo Schembechler's guys, and this is taking an awful turn. What an awful year it's been, right, for Les Miles and the stuff that's come out, what happened, what he was involved in at LSU, and now the whole Bo Schembechler stuff. I mean, it's been a bad year for ironically those guys. But back then, a different time and a different perception of what was going on. So Les Miles, people said Les Miles turned it down. Les Miles and his agent, George Bass, was trying to get the Michigan job. George Bass had been trying to reach Bill Martin, the athletic director, and he wouldn't return his calls. So, publicly, Bill Martin, Mary Sue Coleman, leaked the information to, ironically, a Buckeye, Kurt Herbstreit, who announced that Michigan made an offer and, and he's re-upped with LSU and all that kind of stuff. It's all a ruse. Didn't make an offer because the people that were empowered to make the offer were not returning the phone calls. Well, that made George Bass and made him irate because he wanted the job, tried to get the job, worked his back channels of his friends to try to get the job, and the powers that be wouldn't return his call. And so he's PO'd that they're not returning his call. And then they're going to leak that they made the offer. So and then eventually, if you remember, on the next go around, they actually met with Les at a local establishment in Baton Rouge to appease the boosters when they never had any intention of hiring. Now, Les parlayed that into more money and more years at LSU, used it for leverage. But the media report was, I mean, it is taken as gospel. Les Miles was offered the job twice to go to Michigan. He turned down Michigan. He should have taken, never was offered. A lot of people thought he should have been offered. A lot of people wanted him to be offered on Michigan side. Never offered by the people that matters. Only matters to the people that are making the decision. And yes, there are influencers, but in the end, somebody is empowered with that decision. And the prudent folks keep it to themselves and often throw you off the scent, often plant things through the media, through their own personnel, to see who's leaking it. Because if you give a false story that's not true, and you kind of leak it in your office, and if it ends up, then you know where that leak, you know who's been there, and you might leak something to one guy, something to another, and then the media will maybe take it and go away, and it may go in a direction to where you can track your leaks. That's one thing. Two, you also throw people off the scent of what you're doing. So, how did I know? I wasn't getting information. When they were doing this, they had basically already committed to Brady Hoke. Whether you think it was a good move or not, that's where they were going. And we were working on putting the staff together with Brady. So I knew this stuff. What is this? No. That's for public consumption, and that's not really what's going to happen with Les. So anyway, it's just one of those things that is real interesting to understand how coaching searches work. So keep in mind too, and I don't know, again, in a case of, and I confess I couldn't care less who LSU hires as a baseball coach, and whatever Scott wants to do, he wants to do. But it's interesting to see how some people take a story and everybody, there's no source because there's only one source. I talked with Scott Woodard about a week ago because I was on campus doing some work, and he mentioned something in passing, and I don't think he wasn't going to tell me. I mean, he'd be a fool. Why would he tell me what he's going to? He did mention something about Mike Bianco, and Skip's working on it. Being a little coy, Yeah, I think that's what it was. So anyway, that's that. And I think that's interesting, or at least I hope you find interesting, just in general, that there's a lot that goes on. And because of the world of the information is out there, there's more misinformation than real information. And because information is put out there, I don't know. Now, people will have asked me, even, again, I'll give my best to answer, where is LSU going with the baseball search? Well, I've had people tell me that the Florida guy was going to be the guy. And, when I heard that, when I had heard that wasn't going to fly because of the off-the-field stuff. Now, is that truly somebody they were really interested in? He seems like really good credentials. So he's somebody that, at least from a football guy standpoint, a good baseball coach. Whether they were seriously interested in him or was that floated out, don't know. Been a couple other folks that have mentioned. So I don't know at this point. Here's what I think, and here's what I gather. I think there are a couple of people that they feel like they can get. I mentioned this on another show today. That I think there are two people that they feel that would be good, that they really like. I mean, I think there are more than two, but I think there are two in particular that they like that feel would take the job. And they're, one of them didn't make the College World Series, and one of them did and is already out. So why haven't they hired him? Because I think that Scott Woodward wants to make it run at someone else that's still in. And wants to have a chance to sit down and pitch this to someone else. And if it doesn't work, then he'll go. Now, is there a risk that those two guys that they like might, because their name's out there, might have to re-up with where they are? I don't know. And there's another plan. So, look, it's what you have to do at this point. Usually, and I think at this point, what you hear is different than what's really going on behind the scenes. But so anyway, we'll see how that plays out. And again, let's see. We got a question about LSU talk. Hey, Kev, it says that he's tired of Skipper. Well, some people are, and Skip's a legendary figure there, but he's certainly someone that feels like he owns the LSU baseball program. And, I think that's fine. I think that is someone, if he walks into your office and gives his opinion, if you're the athletic director, you should give that some merit. But if that person becomes very political and tries to twist your arm or tries to manipulate or embarrass you in the media, that's going too far. Rich Coates asks, you mentioned last week on the SEC show that you helped Chad Marsh trying to get the Ole Miss or the SEC school. What were the stories there? No, I didn't try to help him get the Ole Miss job. He was interested in the Ole Miss job. This was before the Arkansas job came open. He had an interest. He was looking to leave SMU, and he was interested. And this was when, and Neil knows this. Neil called me when the rumors of Ole Miss was going to make a move and coach, and I told him, I said, Neil, Ole Miss is, I think, they're going to stay with Matt Luke, and they did, and for that year, and then they made the move later. But then at that time, he was interested in the Ole Miss job because most people thought it was going to come open. It didn't come open. I mean, it did, but they decided to stay with Matt Luke, who was the interim, who they made permanent for the short term. But he was interested. He was looking to make a move. There wasn't really any, he was very interested. He was looking to make a move, and he was really trying to feel out. And, we talked, but that just wasn't, that time wasn't really there. Told him I thought there would be an opportunity. We even talked about, ironically, that there may be an opportunity at Arkansas in a year, and it was, and that's where he ended up. Being from at SMU in the Dallas area, there was a little bit of some key folks that he know in the Dallas area that kind of knew Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones was the key guy that pushed to get Chad Marsh hired. Jerry Jones, an Arkansas grad, pushed to get Chad Marsh hired. Chad, I did not envision Chad being a disaster at Arkansas. That was about as bad of a coaching stint that we've seen in a long time in the SEC. And I'm shocked that it went that bad. I can't say that I thought that he was going to be a hit, but I thought he'd recruit better in Texas, and I certainly thought they would change some things up. I think the thing he got caught in is trying to change the dynamic too quick. He only knew his style, spread, attack, and he tried to go from the power stuff and the transition was a disaster. So he got off to a bad start, and he put himself behind the 8 ball, and then it just got worse, and the culture got worse, and the recruiting affected, and then they were losing games outside the league to weak opponents, and it wasn't. Look, they went a long time before winning a game in the SEC. So there wasn't a really big time like story or anything, because he never was really in the Ole Miss job consideration, because well, let me say this: Ole Miss considered going in a different direction, but I said they're going to stay with Matt. And the reason why I said they were going to stay with Matt for that year is because they wanted to get out from under the NCAA stuff. They knew Matt was going to be loyal to the program, and they felt like, and Chad would have been one that would have been interested, but they felt like that the job would be a more appealing a year later once they got out from the NCAA stuff, that it would be more appealing than it was at that point. So that was kind of the backstory there. All right, want to get into a couple of things, and again, we'll appreciate your questions and you're visiting us in the chat room. I want to get into some of the defensive. We'll break down some of the defensive stuff, and we'll get a little ways, and then we'll go into the. We'll finish it up next week or whenever we can. But we talked a little bit about the offensive schemes in the NFL and who does what, how do they do it, what's their whole mantra of what they try to do, and kind of what they've done and maybe what they may be looking to change this year. So we'll kind of, like we did with the offensive guys, we'll go with alphabetical order, just for no particular reason. The Cardinals last year were a cover one base coverage team with a lot of, and particularly third down blitz, and play a lot of cover one. They're back when Vance Joseph, they were a zone cover team, and they threw a lot of different zone coverage looks, and they'll sprinkle in some man coverage. And he was successful doing that in Miami, a little bit in Denver. But he's adjusted. And again, my motto is the ability to be able to sometimes adjust, sometimes reverse course. If you're married to a system, the system will die. Everybody catches up with the system, because systems are constantly evolving and growing like a virus. You got to stay on top of it. I hate to throw out the term virus with what we've gone through, but you know how that is. There's strands of the virus. Think of schemes as strands, and they grow and they morph. And then now what you see is they play heavy blitz and play more man coverage behind it. Now, they'll play a lot of cover one on early downs, and they probably play cover one amongst the top rates in the league this past year. They were in the top 5 among blitz teams, but they couldn't get to the quarterback enough. And when you blitz and can't get to the quarterback, it's really bad. They were, like in the bottom quarter of the league in pressure rates, and yet they were top 5 in blitz rate. That's a bad combination. So that needs to improve. Now, Atlanta's been a lot different. Now, their base last year was cover 1. That's what they cover 1, cover 3. Now, Dean Pease is coming in, no longer Dan Quinn's defense as the head coach in Atlanta. Now with Arthur Smith, the new coordinator, Dean Pease is going to blitz a lot. He'll send his corner cat blitzes, safety blitzes. He'll bring his defensive backs after the quarterback. He did a lot in Tennessee, and Tennessee's defense fell off quite a bit when he left. So it's something that Arthur believes that he's going to be able to improve a great deal this year. We'll see. Baltimore is another base cover 1 team, blitz and play cover 1 a lot. Wink Martindale gonna play a lot of man on the back end. um, gonna blitz. They find weaknesses in protection. Probably one of the best rates in the league. They get free rushers. They'll play tight man coverage behind it. Only one team played more man snaps, I think, in the league, if I remember when I broke it down, where one receiver was pressed. So Baltimore has created unblocked pressures on a lot more snaps than anybody else in the league. So they get free blitzers better than anybody in the league. Buffalo is another team that's done a good job defensively. Now, they're a cover 3 team base. They'll sit back, play cover 3 or cover 1. Still, again, single high. And, they still play some 2 high, and they'll play quarters coverage pretty high. But Leslie Frazier, Sean McDermott, former defensive coordinator himself, they're not blitz happy. What they do, and they've been most effective on third downs, is when they don't blitz. They finished in the top 10 among grading average per play when they don't blitz on third down. They're probably the best third down defense that doesn't blitz. The better third down defenses are more blitz effect. The best non-aggressive blitzing third down defense, Buffalo. So certainly in the slow in the short list. Carolina, another cover 3 team. They'll play it cover 1. They'll use a player in the hole that they'll drop in. Phil Snow, who's Matt Rule's defense coordinator, came with him from Baylor. They played a lot of college looks. They played man coverage less by 10% last year, 10-12%. But they played more man in third downs. They also used 3 high safeties at the highest rate. Now, in 19, when it was at Baylor, they played base out of a wide 3-4 with multiple safety coverage looks. And it'll be interesting to see how they kind of grow and develop into this, because I think there's a little bit of an eye-opener of how they can take what they did defensively in Big 12 and into college, and it was tough going. They've tried to revamp, as you know, through the last 2 drafts, heavy on defense to try to fix it. That's a biggest thing that they're working on. The Bears. Cover 3, quarters coverage. Some cover 1. They'll play some quarters, as I mentioned. Sean Desai becomes a new defense coordinator. He was been with the defense for a while. Chuck Pagano had a lot of 2 high pre-snap looks, which Vic Fangio was a big fan of back in his day. And so you'll see less of that, and a little bit more varied to what they do. But I still think you'll see some 2 high looks with them. But a little more cover 1 and a little more quarters look. The Bengals have cover 1, third down. They're very big blitzing and playing cover 1. They've tried to be a single high team under Lou Aramu. Playing a lot of cover 1, cover 3 on third down. They finished the second in the league defensive efficiency. Problem is they were less stellar on other downs when they tried to do anything else in the back end. without William Jackson, I think moving more to zone coverage is what they're probably going to do. This was it's going to be a transition year, I think, for them from a personnel standpoint. Cleveland, Tony's team, they're a cover three base team. They'll sit back a lot and play cover three. Talking about low blitz rates, Joe Woods is one of the low blitzer rates in the league by 20%. There's only, I think, 3 or 4 teams that blitz less. They were an average defense last year without blitzing. But they were a bad defense. They were worse when they did blitz. So, again, they're not really made to play well as they'd like to on the back end from a blitz standpoint. I thought they were a pretty good early down defensive team, but they had trouble getting off the field on third downs. I think the one thing that is important for them to improve upon is their third down defense efficiency. I think it's over 40%, if I remember right, that they allowed third down conversions. The Cowboys, another cover 3 team. Of course, Dan Quinn's coming over. He's a cover 3 guy. Now, he's played a lot of cover 1. He's probably played 35, 38% cover 1 and probably maybe just a tad less of cover 3. So he's actually, he's probably played about 12, 15% of cover 2 as a changeup. He's also been more willing to blitz. The blitz rate kind of increased each year, I think out of necessity. But that's ideally not what he likes to do. The Broncos, another cover 3 team, blitz a lot, play cover 1. Vic Fangio. What he does a lot, particularly on early downs, is play a lot of too high pre-snap. Now, he'll spin down to a single high. It keeps the quarterbacks honest. There are a lot more coverage variations that they play post-snap. They do an awful lot post-snap, but boy, they are the pre-snap picture is the highest two-gap look in the league. Pre-snap, single high defenses can mostly only play cover 1 and 2. 1 and 3. If you line up in a cover 1 or a cover 3 look, it's a lot tougher to get back into too high look post snap. But so it's why if you're going to do it, you're going to give more cover 2 look, and then it's easy to get into cover 1 or cover 3 from cover 2 post snap. But it's still basically what he does. It's a cover 2 look that goes into mostly cover 3 post snap. Detroit, it's changed. They play a lot of cover 1 and cover 1 with a whole player there. They were obviously a super man coverage team that lined up man over 40% of the time in 2019, which is the highest rate in the league for a while. Aaron Glenn comes at it a little bit different. He's the new defensive coordinator with the new head coach, Dan Campbell. They'll certainly play man coverage, but working under Dennis Allen, multiple coverage looks. A lot of too high pre-snap looks with a heavy blitz look on third down. So they played a lot of cover 1 at a high rate, and I think you'll see them be a little bit more aggressive. How effective? Don't know. We'll see, but they'll be more aggressive on defense on third downs. Green Bay, another cover 3, cover 1. Joe Barry comes over from the Rams. It'll look a little different than Brandon Staley's defense, although they'll have some components to it. I think Joe's kind of his own guy and has some things that'll be a little different. Barry's defenses in Washington were strictly, almost strictly cover one and cover three, with a little bit of cover two mixed in. So you'll see a little bit more variation. The Texans, and then blitz, cover one on third down, mainly cover three. Lovie Smith. So you'll see in the cover three, which is really the Tampa 2, which is another variation of three deep, is you get the Mike Backer greater depth down the seam. That's the Tampa 2, and that's the difference between the Tampa 2 and the cover 3. Only 3 NFL teams played more than 20% of their pass coverage snaps in cover 2 last season than the Texans. So it's not used as a base defense anymore. Now, his teams at Illinois played more cover 2 than anybody in the country. So you'll see a lot of those components, but variations of it. The Colts are a big sit-back team. They're a cover 3 team. They sit back in quarter coverage. They base out of cover 3. They're not a they're not a big in the quarters. They like to sit in a one gap 4 down front without blitzing. So they try to penetrate and get upfield, and they try to get the 4 down guys loose, and they try to sit back in quarters coverage. It hasn't been as effective as they had hoped. DeForest Buckner hasn't been quite the impact. We'll see if it can go a little bit better. Jacksonville is a cover 3 team as well. Joe Cullen comes over from Baltimore, where we're going to see a little bit more man stuff, but they ran a lot of cover 3 last year. I think they'll be a little bit more multiple in their coverages and definitely in their blitz look. And I think you see the safeties like Wilson and Jenkins become more of a factor in it. The Chiefs, they blitz and play cover 0 or cover 1 a lot because they're very aggressive. They're very aggressive because their offense can score a lot of points, and they're willing to take chances and get extra possessions. Cover 1 and quarters coverage is what they do. That's what Steve Spagnuolo has done an awful lot in Kansas City. He does a lot, Spags does, with a lot of coverage rotations. He plays a lot of too high coverages. Plays some cover 4, some cover 6, some cover 1, and a lot of quarters. So really aggressive on third downs. He took the opposing offenses off the field about 68% of the time on third downs with that particular aggressive third down blitz package. That's pretty good. The Raiders, a cover 1 team defensively. Gus Bradley comes in, they're going to be more cover 3. And then they're going to play even more cover 3. And, that's what they do. That's what Gus does. He's played cover 3 more than anybody, even more than Dan Quinn does. The Chargers. Brandon Staley comes in, defensive guy, cover 3, third down, cover 1, cover 3. It's an aggressive type of, kind of what a lot of what's done with college, with some mixed in Vic Fangio stuff. They show he also, like Vic, was, as I was explaining what Vic does, runs a lot of too high shell before spinning it into cover 3. But they use a tight front. They're like 3 defensive linemen packed between the offensive tackles to force the carry to the outside more than any coach. So they'll reduce their front, which is, again, more college-centric, and try to work the speed to the edges and force you to go outside. Now, Staley will also play the nickelback outside the slot receivers in quarters, despite the fact that most teams will use that player inside so it can be a part of the run fit. So this lightens the box a little bit. So you can, when they're in nickel, they're a little bit more susceptible to run than most, because the safety to that side often has to get into the run fits, but the Rams defense really, if you've got a guy that can cross face pretty quickly, you can get away with it, but he's really got to work to get into the run game. The Rams, again, quarters coverage is their base, blitz and play cover 3, under Brandon Staley, under Raheem Morris. It's going to be quite a different look, and I'm curious to see what done. The tight front is not something that Raheem Morris has done in his past steps. We'll see. In Atlanta, he ran the odd front, the bear front, the 3-4. He runs a lot of different things. He will likely use Jalen Ramsey in a multitude of ways, and it's probably what I'm most curious about. Where does he move him around? How much in nickel? Where does he line him up in nickel? The rate of snaps at outside corner dropped a little bit for Ramsey from 19 to 20. In Atlanta, Morris played a lot more static cover 3 and cover 1, because that's what, it's what Dan Quinn liked, and it's what Ramsey was comfortable doing in Jacksonville. He played like over 80% of his snaps in cover 1 or cover 3 in Jacksonville. So he plays a nickel or slot corner quite a bit, and I'm curious to see how they play him. The Dolphins, cover 1, blitzing cover 3, blitzing cover 1, cover 0. Flores is going to try to play as much man coverage as possible. They were more aggressive than New England blitzing last year. They played a lot of cover 0, man coverage. Defense doesn't stop coming even in those situations. So he's taken a page in that regard. The Vikings, lots of third down blitz, a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 2. Everybody talks about Mike Zimmer being the blitz happy guy, but on early down, he is a sit back guy. He plays cover 3 about 25, 28% of the time, cover 2 about 25% of the time, while showing man coverage about 15% of the time on early downs. Could change with Patrick Peterson, depending on how well Patrick can still cover deep. But I don't think he's going to change a whole lot from his own. In fact, I think they're bringing in Pete with the idea that, playing a lot of pattern match out of his own looks with man principles, that Pete may be even more effective. We'll see. They're about average in blitz rate on third down, and again, below average on early downs. New England, cover 3, cover 1 as well, an awful lot. Just checking the time here, and we got a little time. They'll sell the house, at about 15% of the time, cover 0. And that's the top 5 in the league doing that. Their base coverage switched from cover 1 to cover 3, which is a big shift for them. And it's been a base look for about 3 years now. The Saints, Dennis Allen, has put together a pretty good unit. They play a lot of different coverages, mainly cover 3 in base, blitzing cover 1 on third down. They start in a 2 high and then rotate down. A lot of zones. The best facet of the defense is the 50 or 60 fronts that are using third down to confuse the offensive lines and the quarterbacks. The pressure rate on third down was second best in the league last year. So they really can manufacture some pressure, do a really good job with that. The Giants sit back and play a lot of cover 3 and cover 1, particularly on third down. Some cover 2. It was Patrick Graham's last year did a pretty solid job, but they produced a lot of negative plays, and that was pretty effective for them. The third down defense improved quite a bit. They cut down on some blitzes, played less cover 1. The third down rate dropping by 11%. But he sits in a lot of zone coverage and let the play go in front of him. The Jets obviously are going to change. They have been a predominantly cover two with a heavy blitz factor on third downs. Robert Saleh's scheme is heavy blitzing on third down, so that'll stay the same. But he'll sit too high on early downs, and sometimes on third downs, third and long, he'll sit in cover two. They did a lot of that in his defense in San Francisco. They play a lot of zone on early downs, a lot of cover one. It's a good mixture. What they're able to execute is going to be the key here. So don't necessarily think they're going to get the full Niner package there. What you're going to get is what they can run. The Eagles run a lot of cover one. Jonathan Gannon's coming in with a different approach than Jim Schwartz. Schwartz would sit in cover one or cover three with the corners off, then run the inverted cover two as a changeup. Then where Gannon comes from, the Colts, they ran all sorts of different looks. They're much more multiple. They probably won't blitz any more than they did under Schwartz, but they're going to mix things up a little bit more. He's got a little bit more of an eclectic view of how to mix up coverages than Schwartz did. The Steelers played a lot of cover three, cover one. Third down, they sit back and play cover three. You think about Pittsburgh as a big blitz unit, but they don't really blitz a lot on third down. They have ranked very low on third down blitz rate, and they instead play with a lot of cover one and cover three. They got no problem heating up the quarterback on early downs. They'll play a lot of cover one without a hole player, and their blitz rate on early downs is really high. Later, again, not so much. San Francisco, cover three quarters, blitz and play cover one on third down. D'Amico Ryans takes over for Robert Saleh. He worked under Saleh. The defense is going to stay relatively the same. The base is going to be cover three, low blitz rate on early downs. They'll turn up the pressure on passing downs. They were a lower top 20 early down blitz rate and third down last year. The Seahawks, under Pete Carroll, always going to be cover three. You know, everything that the defensive guys run that have come from that whole tree is Pete's. The cover three, which is a very simple transition from the Tampa 2. That's what Pete grew up under. Monty Kiffin, all of that. They are a top 5 cover 3 usage team every year. But, you know, what they have done is try to blitz a little more, play some cover one, change some things up, because the more you do, and this is a perfect example of this is a philosophy that Pete has, but the ability to change it up a little bit is the key, because once you see it enough, you can figure out how to attack it. You've got to be able to adjust to the adjustments. On the early downs, they ran cover 3 at, you know, about a little bit less than they did in 2019, and they kind of increased their cover 2 look. A lot of those cover 3 snaps went to cover 2, though, which is their second most used coverage, and then cover 3 for the first time. Now, with Jamal Adams in the fold, their third down blitz rate jumped up quite a bit. So their efficiency, though, wasn't as good as there needed to be, but they did it more. Tampa, cover 3, blitz, cover 1, cover 0, and third downs. Todd Bowles is going to blitz, going to play the bear front, 5 defensive linemen covering every offensive lineman. That's what they did. So they're going to allocate pressure to stop the run. It was, on early downs, the best run defense on early downs in the league last year. And they play all those heavy run stop looks. It did well to stop the pass. It was the 4th most efficient pass defense on early downs. On third downs, Bowles will play mostly cover 1, but he will mix some things up. He plays some quarters, some quarter halves, and he'll do a lot of rotations that will certainly factor in. The Titans, little change there. A lot of cover one with a whole player on third down. Vrabel is a physical, defensive, focused guy, but the unit's kind of slipped a little bit. Shane Bowden comes in. He's the de facto coordinator last year. They've got to show improvement over last year. They overhauled their defensive backfield so they can stay in man-heavy defense. Remember, a lot of what Vrabel does, learned under Belichick, but a lot of what Mike is tough guy, attitude relating to players, but as a scheme guy, not that great. So we'll see if they can get back to being a little bit more effective, because he believes and all he knows is playing a lot more man coverage, and they've not been as effective doing it. And then finally, Washington, another cover three, a lot of cover one. They ran a ton of zone last year. They weren't real comfortable when they played man. It was one of the more efficient pass defenses last year. When you play zone and you got an elite defensive line, that's probably the best way to win on defense. If you've got a defensive line that can hunt, 4 guys that can control the line of scrimmage and rush the passer, and you can play cover 3 behind it, cover 2, mix some cover 1 to give different looks, you've got the best of both worlds. Pressure with maximum guys in coverage. Now, we'll see if William Jackson, that signing, will lead to a little bit more man coverage this year. Jackson has been a man cover guy, so just a sign they're going to play a little bit more man, or still, obviously, you use man principles in zone coverage. But he was one of the top 10 cover guys in cover 1 last year. And, they were really good. They're really very underrated defense. So that's a look of the defensive breakdowns of the scheme. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that wasn't too technical or boring for you. Let me know. Rich Coach says, what were your scouting evaluation of Larry Allen out of Sonoma State? Larry Allen was a beast. He was a guy that, until we got him into different environments with better players and all-star games and at the combine, you knew what you had on tape, but you didn't know really what you had because he was so dominant. Well, that's what you got to do at a smaller school, dominate. He did. You got to see how it's going to translate to the next level. So once you drill down into him, you see that he was a finisher. He was a guy that just loved to attack and finish. And then he had, he didn't have great lateral foot quickness. But boy, did he come off with a low flat back and dominate in the run game. And really was a good player. I thought he'd be really good. He was better than I thought he was going to be. Jerome Woods out of Memphis was a good player. I didn't have a real high grade on him. And then Rob Baronis out of Georgia Southern. Well, Rob was, I thought had, pretty decent explosiveness kicking, but I wasn't wasn't all that high on him. Folks, appreciate your time. And again, good to be with you here on the Landry Football Podcast. We are, again, going to try to continue this on Thursdays. And as we transition, and we usually try to do some of this stuff during the summer before we get into the football season. But a note, if you haven't, sign up for Landry Football's conference call to get this podcast to you, Landry Football Podcast. So if you're listening to this, you pick it up on LandryFootball.com. Or if you're listening to this live, please spread the word. If you don't mind linking this to your Twitter followers, your Facebook followers, what we're doing, we really appreciate it. And then we're going to kind of get settled into a new podcast domain with the folks at Podcast Park, hopefully here in the next few weeks. So we've been busy with a lot of behind-the-scenes work. Want to remind you about LandryFootball.com. Take advantage of the scouting season offer. Got all the college breakdowns we're working on. Pretty much close to wrapping up the SEC. Just got 3 or 4 schools left. We have we've got the notebooks every day. Got the NFL previews, draft stuff, recruiting stuff. You name it, we've got it for you. So lots of good things going on. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great rest of the day. Enjoy it, and we'll talk to you next week on another edition of the Landry Football Podcast on Landry Football Conference Call Network. Thank you, everyone.